At Bethesda Regional Medical Center, Nurse Meredith Cole was the woman nobody saw. 3 years of doing her job in silence while the politically appointed chief of staff ran the hospital like his personal empire. When she tried to flag serious security gaps in the presidential visit protocols, he didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Nurses don't handle security. Get back to your patients." The staff laughed. She lowered her head and walked away. She was the joke of every hallway. The quiet one. The one who never pushed back. Until the morning 2 Black Hawk helicopters landed hard on the rooftop helipad, 6 operators in full tactical gear moved through the emergency entrance like they owned the building, and the lead agent swept the corridor with sharp eyes until they landed on her face and stopped. The entire floor went silent. Agent Cole. His voice cut through every conversation in that hallway. "The president arrives in 2 hours. We have a situation. We need a commanding officer. Now." 3 years of whispers. 3 years of being invisible. 3 years of being told she didn't belong. And just like that, she was the only person in that building who did. If quiet heroes are your kind of story, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I'd love to know. Hit that like button, subscribe, and welcome to Secrets of Silent Badges. You're in the wrong room again. Dr. Raymond Holt didn't look up from his tablet when he said it. He never looked up. Meredith Cole stood in the doorway of the supply corridor. A medication cart in front of her, a patient chart in her hand, and 3 years of practice keeping her face perfectly still. "Room 14 is pending discharge," she said. "I was rerouting the afternoon meds to—" "I didn't ask for an explanation." He swiped something on the screen. "I asked you to stop cutting through the administrative wing. It's disruptive. The east hallway is blocked. Maintenance crew. Use the stairs." He walked past her without another word. The cart was heavy. The stairs added 4 minutes to every round. 11 patients were waiting. Meredith pushed the cart toward the stairs. That was a Tuesday. Tuesdays were like that. Wednesdays were sometimes worse. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days at Bethesda Regional Medical Center. Meredith knew the layout of every floor. Which supply closets were mislabeled, which elevators ran slow, which overnight residents ordered coffee at 2 a.m. and forgot to replace the pot. She knew the building the way she had known every other building she had ever worked in, completely, quietly, from the inside out. 38 years old, 5'6". Ash blonde hair pulled back in a loose knot that was never quite neat enough to look intentional and never quite messy enough to draw a comment. Hazel eyes that caught light in a way that sometimes made people pause, then look away, unsure why. A faint scar ran along the left side of her jaw, thin as a seam, barely visible unless the light hit it at the wrong angle. Most people never noticed it. The ones who did never asked. A reputation for being competent and forgettable. Meredith had worked hard for both. Bethesda Regional was not a military hospital. That distinction mattered to her. It sat 11 miles from the naval base, close enough to receive overflow patients, far enough to feel civilian. The staff was a mix. Former military medics who had transitioned, nurses who had never been anywhere near a uniform, administrators who had learned the word protocol in business school and used it like a weapon. Dr. Raymond Holt had learned it in business school. Appointed chief of staff 14 months ago. Before that, director of operations at a private clinic in Maryland. Before that, a hospital administrator in Virginia. He had never practiced medicine. His medical degree was a formality he mentioned at every staff meeting. His actual skills were political. The right connections, the right boards, the right checks, to the right campaigns. And 6 months ago, Bethesda Regional had been selected. Selected as the emergency medical backup site for a presidential visit. The President of the United States was scheduled to attend a ceremony at the adjacent Air Force installation in 8 days. Protocol required a designated civilian trauma facility within a 12-mile radius to be cleared, staffed, and prepared for contingency medical response. Bethesda Regional had the capacity, the location, and the right zip code. Holt had treated the selection like a personal achievement. Full staff meeting the morning the notification arrived. New suit. He stood at the head of the conference room and told them all this was a reflection of the hospital's excellence, a reflection of his leadership. The word protocol 11 times in 20 minutes. Meredith had counted. She had also identified 4 immediate security vulnerabilities within the first 48 hours of the announcement. Access points on the ground floor that fed directly into patient corridors. A loading dock that connected to the main hallway with no secondary checkpoint. A service elevator that required no badge after 6 p.m. due to a systems update that had never been fully implemented. And a staff credentialing process that was thorough on paper and almost completely unverified in practice. 1 page. Concise. Specific. Left on Holt's desk on a Thursday morning. He called her into his office that afternoon. Meredith stood across from his desk while he held the paper like something that had been delivered to the wrong address. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "I wrote it." "You." He set it down. "A floor nurse. I noticed some gaps in the current protocols. Given the timeline, gaps." He repeated the word the way people repeated words when they found them amusing. "You walked the building and decided you found gaps." "Yes." "In a security assessment prepared by a federal advance team." Meredith said nothing. "Do you know what an advance team is?" She knew exactly what an advance team was, had run advance teams, had trained the people who ran advance teams, had stood in rooms like this one, smaller, colder, better lit, and briefed people with far more authority than Raymond Holt on threat matrices that would have made his hair go white. "I understand the process," she said. "Then you understand this isn't your department." He slid the paper to the side of the desk. "Nurses provide patient care. Security is handled by people who are trained and authorized to handle it. That's not a criticism. It's just how things work. The loading dock is not your concern." He picked up his tablet. The meeting was over. "Get back to your floor." She got back to her floor. That was 6 days ago. The loading dock still had no secondary checkpoint. Medication rounds finished at 4:40 p.m. Everything documented. Labs cross-checked on 2 patients. An abnormal potassium result flagged for the on-call resident. In room 9, a post-surgical dressing changed with the kind of focused efficiency that made the patient exhale and say, "You've done that before." "A few times," Meredith said. The patient was a retired school teacher named Gerald, 71 years old, hip replacement, a son in the army and a daughter in dental school. He talked about both of them constantly. Meredith had learned their names without trying. "You always do it without looking at the clock," Gerald said. "Most of the nurses look at the clock. I don't need to. What's your hurry today? You seem—" He paused, watching her hands move across the dressing. Focused. The last edge smoothed flat and pressed down with 2 fingers. 8 more rooms, she said. Gerald nodded slowly, like that was the answer he expected, and also not the answer to what he'd actually asked. He had that quality, the ability to ask 2 questions at once, and hear only one of the answers and know it. Rounds finished at 6:15, charted for 40 minutes, handed off to the evening shift at 7 p.m. With a full report, no gaps, no loose ends. The kind of handoff that other nurses called thorough, and that was, in fact, something else entirely. The practiced discipline of someone who had learned to leave nothing undocumented, nothing assumed, nothing that would require a call at 2 a.m. to clarify. The walk to the parking garage was quiet. Meredith sat in her car for 3 minutes before starting the engine. A habit. 3 minutes. Mirrors checked. Lot checked. Not because anything was expected, because some habits were not habits. They were architecture. The shape of a mind built a certain way by years of standing in places where the cost of not looking was permanent. Engine started, 11 minutes home, alternate routes timed, traffic lights mapped, the stretch between exit 7 and the residential blocks, a blind spot that would matter if someone was following, the cameras at the intersection before the turn, their coverage angles, the gap between them. No one was following. She knew that too. The apartment was small and clean and nearly empty in the way that spaces were empty when someone had chosen them for function rather than feeling. A couch, a table, 2 chairs, books on a shelf organized not by genre or author but by size, because she had learned long ago that a disorganized shelf attracted questions from people who visited, and Meredith did not want questions. Dinner made. Eaten standing at the counter, which was faster and required no decision about where to sit. An hour of reading, a journal, not fiction, nothing that pulled too hard. At 9:47 p.m. a phone buzzed. Not the personal one, the other one. Kept in the drawer beneath the kitchen counter. Beneath a cutting board never used, in a space verified on move-in day to be invisible from the doorway. Book set down. Kitchen crossed. Drawer opened. A single line on the screen. No name, no number she recognized. Plain text, the kind that left no metadata, routing through systems she knew and had used before in other contexts, in other lives. Advance confirmation. 8 days out. Asset flagged. Need eyes on site. Read twice. Phone returned. Drawer closed. Meredith stood in her kitchen for a long time, looking at nothing, while somewhere 11 miles away a loading dock sat unguarded, and a service elevator ran without a badge check, and a chief of staff slept soundly in the certainty that the right people were handling everything. Bed at last. Sleep, slow to arrive. Outside, the city moved the way cities moved at night. Traffic thinned. A siren rose somewhere to the north and faded into the distance. A dog barked twice on the street below and stopped. Eyes open on the ceiling, she counted the things she knew. The hospital floor plan, every corridor, every junction, the shift schedules, and which rotations left which doors unmonitored for which windows of time. Which staff members were diligent, and which ones were tired, and which ones had developed the particular kind of blindness that came from doing the same job in the same building for too many years. She knew what was coming, and she knew, with a certainty that lived somewhere older than thought, that the next 8 days were not going to go the way Raymond Holt had planned. The message stayed in her mind all night, like a splinter she couldn't reach, not the words. Those were processed in the first 10 seconds. Asset flagged, eyes on sight. Meredith knew what that meant. Had written messages like that herself, years ago, in different rooms, for different people who were paid to worry about different things. What stayed with her was the timing. 8 days. The president's visit was in 8 days. Someone, somewhere in a building she would never see, had flagged an asset connected to this hospital. They needed eyes on the ground, eyes that already had access. Eyes that had been there long enough to know the building the way a person knew their own kitchen in the dark. Her eyes. Up at 5:15, coffee made. Standing at the window while the sky went from black to gray to the particular pale color that meant Maryland in October. Thin light, cold undertones, the sun not quite committing. No call back. Not yet. She drove to the hospital. Morning shift started at 7. She was there at 6:30, which was not unusual. The parking garage was quiet. 2 cars on the 3rd level. A security guard making rounds on foot, earbuds in, chin down. She watched him cross the lower level without checking the stairwell door. Noted. Inside, the day started the way all days started. Labs, vitals. Room 4 had spiked a low-grade fever overnight and needed a new culture ordered. Gerald in room 9 was asking if his son had called. He hadn't. She told him she'd check with the front desk, and meant it, and did it on the way past. At 8:20, Holt appeared on the floor. He rarely came down. He had an office on the 4th level and a calendar full of meetings with people whose titles were longer than their actual responsibilities. When he appeared on the clinical floors, it meant something administrative was happening. An inspection, a presentation, a visit. Today he had 2 people with him, not hospital staff. Meredith could see that from the far end of the corridor. The way they moved was wrong for the building, not threatening wrong, but trained wrong. the particular movement of people navigating unfamiliar spaces with authority they hadn't earned there yet. They held themselves differently, scanned differently, federal, advanced team, medication cart, eyes forward, unremarkable. Holt was talking loudly, gesturing at the ceiling, pointing at the corridor length, performing the role of a man who understood buildings and security and the full weight of what was being prepared here. The two agents, both male, both mid-30s, civilian clothes designed to look exactly like civilian clothes, listened with the patience of people who had already made their assessments and were now performing the courtesy of hearing someone else's. She passed within 8 feet of them. Neither agent looked at her. She looked at them. The one on the left had a slight bulge under his left arm, correctly placed and correctly worn. He held his notepad in his right hand, left dominant. The one on the right carried nothing. He was scanning the ceiling, looking for something specific. She knew what he was looking for. Would have been looking for the same thing herself, in the same order, starting from the same corner. She turned the corner, kept going. At 10:15, restocking the medication cabinet in the east hallway, she heard Holt's voice rise slightly, not loudly, just the tone of a man being contradicted by someone he had not expected to contradict him. No need to move closer. The corridor carried sound in that particular way of long institutional hallways. Already been cleared, Holt was saying. The credentialing process is hospital verified and that's... The concern isn't credentialing, sir, it's the secondary access points. The loading dock has been operational for... The operational history isn't the issue. The issue is the current configuration doesn't meet the... I can get you our security documentation in 20 minutes. A pause. That would be helpful, the agent said, in the measured voice of someone who had already decided that documentation was not going to be helpful. Cabinet closed, moving on. Lunch at noon in the break room on the second floor, back to the wall, automatic, reading a journal article on post-surgical wound care, also automatic, while thinking about the loading dock. North side of the building, medical supply deliveries, Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. Direct connection to the main supply corridor. 40 feet to the patient wing junction. Badge reader at the junction. The dock itself. Camera, keypad. Code unchanged since the camera was installed 18 months ago. The hospital's zip code. She had tested it on her 3rd day and stored the result in the category of things she would never need and should not forget. At 1:45 p.m., a patient arrived in room 12 that changed the afternoon. His name was David Carver, 61 years old. Transferred from an urgent care clinic 20 minutes south. Chief complaint chest discomfort and elevated troponin. He arrived calm, slightly gray around the edges, with the particular bearing of a man who had spent a long time learning to minimize his own discomfort in front of other people. Military. Visible before the intake form confirmed it. Army, retired, 22 years. BP 148/91. Heart rate 88. Respirations normal. The troponin elevation was mild but real. Chest discomfort started 6 hours ago. 2 of those spent waiting because, he said, he thought it would pass. Has it passed? Meredith asked. Not entirely. Rate it now, 1 to 10. That pause, the one where a person accustomed to high pain tolerance recalibrated their scale for someone who might not share the same baseline. 4, he said. What would you call a 10? He almost smiled. I've had worse. Monitor leads placed quickly, correct sequence, no reference card consulted. Carver watched her hands the whole time. You move like someone who's done this under pressure, he said. I've had busy shifts. Not what I meant. Last lead placed, reading checked, sinus rhythm. Normal axis, no ST changes. Good. Paging the cardiologist, Meredith said. Repeat troponin in 3 hours and I'd like you to stay on the monitor. Can you do that? I'm not going anywhere. Good. Is there someone I should call? My wife. She'll want to come. I'll have the front desk reach out. Moving toward the door. You didn't look at the poster, Carver said. Stop. When you placed the leads, not once. She turned back. He was watching her with the particular steadiness of a man who had spent a career paying close attention to the people around him. The kind of attention that was not curiosity, it was assessment. "I've placed a lot of leads," she said. "I was in intelligence," Carver said. 22 years. The thing about intelligence, the thing you never stop doing, is noticing what doesn't fit. And you, Nurse Cole, don't quite fit." She held his gaze for one even moment. "I'll get the cardiologist order in," she said. Order entered at the nursing station. Then 4 seconds standing at the counter looking at nothing. 4 seconds was enough. Carver was pattern matching. He had noticed something, flagged it. That was all, not a threat. Still thinking about the loading dock. At 3:30, she walked the north corridor, past the supply junction, past the badge reader, through the double doors into the service hallway, loading dock entrance, keypad, camera above it, indicator light green. The bracket holding the camera was slightly loose on the left side, 1/2 centimeter, barely visible. She had walked this corridor 4 times in 3 years and had not noticed that before. Someone had been at this camera recently. Nothing touched. Turn around. Back to the floor. At 4:55, single occupancy bathroom near the 2nd floor stairwell. Door locked. Second phone out. 4 words typed. Loading dock. Camera compromised. Sent. Phone put away. Hands washed. In the mirror for one moment. Ash blonde, slightly loose by late afternoon. Hazel eyes that looked, right now, less like the eyes of a floor nurse, and more like something she had worked very hard to bury under 3 years of quiet routine. The phone buzzed once. Taken out. 2 words. We know. The rest of the afternoon was ordinary in the way that afternoons could be ordinary, while everything underneath them shifted. Gerald asked about his son again. A call placed to the front desk. Voicemail left that morning. The phone held to his ear, the old man listening, and Meredith in the doorway thinking about a camera bracket moved 1/2 centimeter, about who had moved it, about what they had been looking for. 8 days. Shift ended at 7, handed off clean, drove home. 3 minutes in the car. The mirror check skipped. She already knew what was out there. Carver came to mind. 22 years in intelligence. Eyes that missed nothing and said so plainly. Then the agent arguing with Holt about the loading dock. 2 words. We know. If they knew and still needed eyes on site, the problem was bigger than a loose camera bracket. Something was already in motion. Bed at 10. Sleep came in 4-hour segments, and that was enough. 6 days out, the hospital changed. Not visibly. Nothing that would register to someone not paying attention. Same patient census. Same staff rotation. The fluorescent lights in the east corridor still flickered. Maintenance had been promising to fix that for 4 months, and the promise had acquired the texture of something nobody actually intended to do. But the building felt watched. Meredith recognized it the way you recognized a sound heard before in a context you'd rather forget. A low-level attentiveness in the air. More people moving with purpose through spaces they had no clear reason to be in. A utility van in the parking structure on the 2nd level. Utility markings, parked in the same spot for 2 days. Utility vehicles rotated. They didn't park and stay. Noted on day 1. Not mentioned to anyone. The advance team came back. Same 2 agents, plus a 3rd. A woman, late 40s, silver hair cropped short. Visitor badge on a lanyard she held slightly away from her chest in the unconscious way of someone who found visitor badges irritating. She moved differently than the other 2. Slower, more deliberate. She stopped at junctions, looked at corners, paused at doorways before entering. She was reading the building the way it needed to be read. Meredith recognized the methodology, kept her distance. At 10:40, the woman stopped outside room 12. Carver was still there. Cardiologist had ordered 48-hour observation after a 2nd mild troponin elevation. Stable, mobile, mildly impatient. Spending his time reading and refusing to admit the situation worried him. The woman looked at the room number, then at the chart rack outside the door. She didn't touch it. just looked at it with the focused attention of someone filing information. Then she looked down the corridor. Her eyes found Meredith and stayed there for exactly 2 seconds. Not a casual glance, a cataloging. Gaze held, then back to the medication cart. Morning round finished without incident. At noon, Holt called a department heads meeting. Not invited. Meredith heard about it from Patricia on the way to the elevators. "He's telling everyone it's routine coordination for the visit," Patricia said. 20 years at Bethesda Regional, the kind of institutional memory that knew where every skeleton was buried and had opinions about the burial methods. Half those people have never been in the same room as a federal agent before, and you can hear them from the hallway. "Nervous?" Meredith asked. "Excited," Patricia said. "Which is worse? Nervous people slow down and double-check. Excited people stop seeing what's in front of them." Meredith thought about that on the elevator. About a building full of people who were excited, and a building full of other people who were counting on exactly that. Back on the floor at 1 p.m., and Carver was standing in the hallway in his hospital gown, arms folded, talking to the woman with the silver hair. Meredith stopped at the far end of the corridor. They were speaking quietly. Carver's posture was different from how it had been in the room. Straighter. The guardedness he'd carried since admission was gone, replaced by something looser, more settled. He looked like someone who had found solid ground beneath uncertain footing. The woman saw Meredith stop, said something brief to Carver, then looked up. Carver looked over. He smiled. Not warmly, but specifically, the smile of someone who had just received information they found useful. Meredith walked forward. "Nurse Cole," Carver said, "this is Agent Reyes. She has a question for you." Reyes turned fully. Dark eyes, very direct. Extended hand, grip calibrated, not aggressive, not performatively soft. Exactly what it needed to be. "Mr. Carver speaks highly of you," Reyes said. "He's a generous patient. He says you placed 12 lead EKG leads without consulting the reference card. Under 40 seconds. Meredith said nothing. "He also says when you left his room the first time, you checked the hallway in both directions before walking. Not a casual look, a check. 360 awareness, one smooth motion." "It's a busy floor." "It is," Reyes said. "Can I ask where you trained?" "Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, and before that, community college in—" "That's not what I'm asking." The hallway was quiet. A call light went on somewhere to the right. She heard it and did not look. "I should get back to my patients," Meredith said. Reyes reached into her jacket pocket. A card, plain white, name, phone number, nothing else. Held out with 2 fingers. "If you think of anything useful," Reyes said, "about the building, the staff, anything that seems off to you." A pause. "Your observation about the loading dock was accurate. By the way, we've addressed it. Card taken. Back to work. Bathroom at 2:15. The card examined. Standard stock paper. 202 area code. Washington. No title on the card, which meant something. Put it in her pocket. At 3:01, mid-dressing change in room 7. The overhead PA activated. Security to main entrance. Security to main entrance. Uncommon, but not rare. Usually a difficult family member. Occasionally a patient. Dressing taped. The woman recovering from knee replacement looked at the ceiling. "Think it's something bad?" she asked. "Probably not," Meredith said. At the corridor door, the stairwell at the far end was propped open. Small rubber doorstop at the base. That door used a magnetic lock that disengaged during fire alarms. It was not a fire alarm. 3 seconds of looking at the doorstop, then walking toward it. Stairwell empty, 1 flight down. Ground floor door also propped. She pushed through into the service corridor. A man at the far end near the supply junction. Dark green maintenance coveralls. Hospital facilities logo on the cart he was pushing. The logo was wrong. Font weighed off. The blue a shade too dark. She had walked past the real carts for 3 years, and something in the composition had shifted in a way that most people would never catch, and that she could not have explained in language that would satisfy anyone who hadn't been trained to look. Unhurried walked toward the nearest supply closet. Inside. Door left 1 inch open, watching through the gap. He stopped at the junction, did not enter the supply room, looked back the way he had come, then took something from the cart, small, rectangular, black, and reached up toward the underside of the shelf bracket on the wall near the badge reader. That motion was familiar. Meredith had made that motion before. Different buildings, different countries, different devices on different surfaces for different purposes. The physical grammar of it was the same. Regular phone out. 2 photos through the gap, then 2 more at a slightly different angle. The man replaced the cart panel, turned, walked back toward the stairwell, unhurried, purposeful. Count to 30, then out of the closet. The device was still there, small, matte black, magnetic mount, seated where the bracket met the wall. A signal relay, the kind used to clone badge access data when a card was presented to the reader. Every swipe captured and transmitted to wherever it was going. Someone was building a duplicate access profile for this corridor. Nothing touched. Removing it would signal discovery. That could not happen, not yet. Back to the stairwell. 2nd floor, single occupancy bathroom, door locked. 2nd phone out. Corridor J, badge reader, signal relay, placed in last 10 minutes. Maintenance cover, cart. Single male, 50-ish dark coveralls. Have photos. Reply in 11 seconds. Don't touch it. Send photos. Do not engage. Do not tell hospital security. Photos attached. Sent. Another reply, 7 seconds later. Good eyes. Stand by, stand by. She had stood by before. In embassies. In vehicles parked on streets that smelled like diesel and heat. In hotel rooms with a view of a target location and a radio that would say when to move. Standing by was a practiced state. It was not the same as standing still. Phone away, door unlocked, back to the floor. Gerald's room. His son was coming Saturday, and the old man was already organizing the day like a military operation. Lunch, a drive. Maybe out to the water if the weather held. Meredith listened and nodded in the right places and thought about a device the size of a matchbox, quietly reading every badge that came within 3 feet of the corridor below. 6 days out. Someone was already inside. Last round at 6:45, everything documented. Room 12 quiet, Carver asleep. Monitor steady. East stairwell door no longer propped. Doorstop removed, lock re-engaged. Someone had cleaned up the detail. On the way out, 2nd level of the parking structure, the utility van was gone. In its place, a black SUV, government plates, tinted glass. Walked past without slowing. Home. Car. 3 minutes. Inside. Standing in the kitchen, thinking about the device on the bracket. Small, magnetic, quiet. Already recording everything that moved through that corridor. Whoever placed it had known the building, known the corridor, known which reader controlled access to the patient wing. That was not improvised knowledge. That was the product of research, or access, or both. Drawer opened under the cutting board. 2 new messages on the 2nd phone. The first, device confirmed. Secondary team on site. The second, you're going to be needed. Read both twice. Phone replaced. Tea made, not touched, left cooling on the counter. Bed, 5 days out. He was leaning against the nurse's station when she arrived at 6:28 in the morning. Not Holt, not Carver, not anyone she had seen in this building before. Tall, dark jacket, no badge. No visitor lanyard. No reason to be standing there with a coffee cup in one hand, and the posture of someone who had arrived early and was completely comfortable with that. He was looking at her before she came through the door. You noticed when someone's eyes found you before you gave them a reason to look. She walked to the station, set her bag down, logged into the terminal, pulled up the overnight notes. Room 4, fever resolved. Room 9, Gerald slept well. Room 12, Carver cleared for discharge pending morning labs. Nurse Cole, he said. She didn't answer. She kept reading. He moved closer without making it obvious he was moving, which required practice. He set the coffee on the counter. Both hands visible. That was deliberate. Agent Marcus Dre, he said. I've been briefed on your contact with Agent Reyes yesterday. She looked at him, mid-40s, 6 feet even, lean but not thin, the kind that came from a body used rather than maintained. A jaw that had been broken at least once and set slightly off-center, gray beginning at the temples, eyes that were a color she couldn't immediately name, somewhere between green and something older and harder to categorize. She had seen a lot of faces in a lot of situations. This face wasn't giving her the information it should have. There was a practiced absence in it, a deliberate withholding. That was interesting. I already told Agent Reyes I don't have anything to add, she said. She told me that too. He picked up the coffee. She also told me what she said to you about the loading dock, that we'd addressed it. A pause. We didn't address it. Meredith kept her expression level. We flagged it, Dre said. There's a difference. Flagging means we know about it. Addressing means we've resolved it. The dock is still a vulnerability. We don't have the personnel to cover it continuously without tipping off whoever placed that relay that we're onto them. Then why are you telling me? Because the person who spotted the relay before we did is standing in front of me, and I'd rather have her aware than not. Overnight notes closed. Morning medication schedule opened. I'm a floor nurse, she said. I know what you are. The way he said it was not aggressive. It was not a threat. It was the quiet tone of someone stating a fact they had verified and were done debating. The corridor was still mostly empty. Patricia came through the far door, badge on, coffee half drunk, nodded at Meredith without looking at Dre. Either hadn't seen him or had been told not to register him. 4 days, Dre said. That's the window. The device on the bracket is transmitting. Whoever placed it is building an access profile. They'll have enough data by the time the visit begins to clone any badge in this building. That badge gets them through the junction reader and into the patient corridor without triggering a single alarm. Have you told Holt? A pause. No. Why not? Because Holt's calendar has been accessed from an external IP address 3 times in the last 5 days. We don't know how much he knows. Don't know if it's careless security hygiene or something more deliberate. Until we do, the fewer people briefed, the better. She absorbed that. Holt's calendar, 3 times. Someone tracking his schedule. His meetings. His preparation timeline. Building a map of what the hospital knew, and when it knew it. What do you need from me? She asked. Same thing you've been doing. Move through the building. Watch the corridors. If you see the man in the coveralls again, or anyone who doesn't fit, you send it to the number you already have. He picked up the coffee. And I need you to discharge room 12. She looked up. Carver's labs are clean, Dre said. He can go home. I'd prefer him out of the building before this gets complicated. Carver doesn't know about any of this. Dre looked at her with the expression of someone choosing not to correct a misunderstanding they found mildly entertaining. She thought about Carver's eyes, the way they'd tracked her movements. 22 years in intelligence. The conversation with Reyes outside his door. The specific quality of that smile when Meredith had approached. He knows more than he said, she said. He knows enough that I'd prefer him home. Note made. Dre pushed off from the counter. He was leaving. One more thing, she said. He stopped. Holt's calendar. Have you ruled out someone on staff? He looked at her for a moment without answering. It was a particular kind of pause. The pause of someone deciding how much of a real answer to give. We haven't ruled out anyone, he said. Then he walked toward the elevator. His gait was even and unhurried, and told her nothing she could use, which meant he was either very practiced at controlled movement or very aware of being watched, possibly both. Back to the terminal, hands steady. She hadn't noticed, until just now, that they had been this whole time. At 9, David Carver was discharged. His wife, Helen, small, precise, 2 sharp questions about cardiac restrictions before she accepted the discharge paperwork. Not a woman who signed things without reading them, had come to collect him. Carver stood in street clothes in the corridor, and looked less like a patient and more like himself, whatever that meant for a man with 22 years of classified work behind him. "Thank you," he said. "Follow up with cardiology in 10 days, Meredith said. "I meant for the other thing." She looked at him. He had his jacket on, bag in hand, the same careful attention in his eyes that had been there since the first hour. Something different in his expression now. Not suspicion. Closer to apology. "There are people in this building who know exactly who you are," he said quietly. "And there are people in this building who shouldn't know, and are working very hard to find out." A pause. "Be careful which conversations you have in which hallways." He walked to the elevator with his wife. Meredith stood in the corridor and let the words settle. "Be careful which conversations you have in which hallways." The morning replayed itself. The nursing station. Dre's voice carrying just enough in that empty corridor. The direction of the nearest camera, the badge reader down the hall from where they had been standing. She turned and looked directly at the hallway camera, angled correctly. Standard coverage. Walked past it 1,000 times and never looked at it directly. The indicator light was green. The relay on the bracket 2 floors below. Signal transmission. A device the size of a matchbox reading a badge through drywall from 3 feet if positioned correctly. A camera that was standard everything. And when had it last been calibrated? And what was it actually connected to? Patricia. Find Patricia. The break room, sandwich and phone, genuine lunch focus. "The security cameras on this floor," Meredith said. "Who manages the feed?" Patricia looked up. "Facilities. Why?" "When was the system last serviced?" 3-4 weeks ago." "Big thing about it. They updated the network routing for the cameras. Something about the new administrative system Holt brought in. Network routing update. 3 weeks ago, just before the presidential visit was announced." "All floors?" "As far as I know." Patricia was fully watching her now. "Meredith, what's going on?" "Nothing." Noticed a light flickering. Back to the floor. At 11:40, the stairwell door at the end of the corridor opened in a way that was slightly too fast for someone who belonged there. Count to 2, then look. A woman walking toward her. 30s, dark hair, scrubs the right color, wrong cut, just enough off to flag if you were looking for it. Badge clipped correctly on the right side. Walk confident, pace purposeful. She checked 3 room numbers, glanced at charts, kept moving. None of those rooms were her assignment. Meredith knew every nurse's assignment on this floor, which patient was in which room, which charts had been pulled that morning. Message sent. East corridor. 3rd floor, female, late 30s, dark hair, incorrect scrub fit, badge clipped right side. Checking rooms 7, 9, 11. Not staff. 8-second reply. Copy. Do not confront. The woman stopped outside room 11. Empty since that morning. She went in. Meredith counted to 15. She walked to room 11, stopped outside the open door, looked in. Empty room. No woman. The window was open. 3rd floor. Fire escape to the service alley on the north side. The north side. The loading dock side. Standing in that empty room with the October air coming through the window, she thought about Carver's warning. About cameras connected to places they shouldn't be. About badge data, traveling on frequencies it had no business using. About 4 days remaining, and a device quietly reading credentials below, and a chief of staff whose schedule was being tracked by people with no right to it. And about the man from this morning. Dre. His broken jaw and his careful hands, and the way he had said he knew what she was, as if it were something looked up, not something she had shown him. The personal phone buzzed. Unsaved number. Cole. Dre's voice. "The woman you flagged. We had eyes on her. She made contact in the alley before we could close." "I know. The window." A pause. "Recalibrating." "You checked the room," he said. "Yes." Another pause. "We need to talk," he said. "Not in the building." The alley below was empty. Brick walls. A dumpster. A fire escape railing she could have cleared in under 4 seconds without thinking about it. "Dinner," she said, because she needed a word that was ordinary, and that was the one that came. The silence lasted a half-second longer than a professional response required. 7 o'clock, he said. "There's a place on Mercer. I'll send the address." He hung up. The window closed. Latched. Back to her patience. The restaurant on Mercer was small and unremarkable, in the way that places chosen for sensitive conversations were always small and unremarkable. No music loud enough to force projection, no open sightlines from the street, a back corner that sat naturally against a wall. Dre had taken that table. She would have chosen it herself. His jacket was off. He looked like someone who had been working since before sunrise and had stopped pretending it didn't show. A particular kind of weariness that was not weakness but weight, the accumulation of sustained operational attention over too many consecutive hours. She sat across from him. He slid a folder to her without preamble. "Hartwell," he said. "The tech who serviced the camera network 6 weeks ago. Credentials checked out completely. Employment history, clearances, all of it." A pause. "The identity was built 8 months ago. Before that, it doesn't exist." Folder opened. A photo. Unremarkable face. The kind designed to be forgotten in a crowd and on a camera feed. She had seen 100 faces like it. Had trained people to construct them. "The woman from the 3rd floor," she said. "Same cell. 3 people confirmed inside this building over the last 2 weeks with constructed credentials. Possibly more." He leaned forward slightly. "The target is the president's attending physician, Dr. Elaine Foss. She travels with the motorcade and is designated to use this facility for any medical emergency. If someone has cloned corridor access and knows her arrival protocols—" "They don't need the president," Meredith said. "Just the doctor." She closed the folder. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked at her steadily. "I've read your file, Cole." The table was quiet. "I know it's incomplete," he said. "Sections classified above my clearance level. What I can access tells me you spent 11 years with the Secret Service. That your last assignment was as special agent in charge of a presidential protection detail. That you left under what the file calls administrative separation." A pause. "I'm not asking you to explain it. I need you to help me finish this." She had carried that file for 3 years. Every corridor, every shift. The weight of it had become familiar in the way that old injuries became familiar. Present always, acute only when touched. "Holt isn't compromised," she said. "He's vain and political and in over his head. The calendar access is someone reading over his shoulder. He's a vulnerability, not an asset to them. He won't understand the threat clearly enough to be useful to it. How do I handle him? Give him something that makes him feel important. A role. A title for the day. He'll cooperate enthusiastically if cooperation makes him look like part of the solution." Dre nodded slowly. "And the actual work?" he asked. She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them said what the actual work was. Neither needed to. She got home at 10:15, stood in the kitchen without turning on more than one light, thought about 11 years, about the last detail, about the decision made in 3 seconds that had been right and that had still cost her everything, about the form that said administrative separation in the careful language of people who needed to end things without fingerprints. Thought about Dre saying, "I've read your file the way someone said I understand." Bed, eyes open for a long time. Back in the building at 5:50 the next morning. The day started with the kind of stillness that preceded things. Not dread, not adrenaline, a sharpening, the particular clarity that arrived when everything irrelevant fell away and what remained was only the problem and the geometry of solving it. At 7:15, the second phone buzzed. Loading dock. Movement. Already moving before the message finished loading. Stairs to the ground floor. Service corridor. Through the double doors. Loading dock entrance ahead. Keypad glowing. Camera indicator green. A man at the keypad. Not the man from the coveralls. Younger, shorter, brown delivery uniform, clipboard in one hand, package under his arm, entering a code deliberately wrong, running sequences, testing which combinations produced which responses, 12 feet away. He heard the footsteps, turned, eyes going from scrubs to face to corridor behind her in under a second, a trained threat assessment in a civilian disguise. "Delivery for the pharmacy," he said, level voice, hand at his side. "Pharmacy is on 2, Meredith said, accessible from the main entrance, not the loading dock. System sent me here. The system doesn't route pharmacy deliveries to the loading dock." 2 seconds of silence that were not silence. He moved, not toward her but toward the alley exit, left hand coming up with a radio. "Calling contacts in." She counted. 8 seconds, maybe, before this corridor became unmanageable alone. 4 steps to close the distance. His radio arm caught at the wrist and turned. A motion economical enough to look simple. And it was simple. The way things became simple after 10,000 repetitions in training rooms in buildings that no longer existed. The radio hit the floor. His free hand swung. She stepped inside it, used his momentum, put him against the wall with his arm behind him and her forearm across his shoulders. He was trained. He was not trained enough. "Don't," she said quietly. He went still. Her phone was in her pocket and unreachable. She raised her voice. "I need security to loading dock north. Now." The stairwell door behind her opened. She adjusted her grip, readied for a second contact, turned her head just enough to see. Dre. One look at the scene, badge out. 2 officers in tactical vests behind him. The man stopped struggling completely when he saw the vests. Dre crossed the corridor and took over the hold with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this in smaller spaces with less warning. One look at Meredith. She stepped back. The nurse in the corridor again. Hands steady. Breathing normal. Scrubs slightly wrinkled at the left sleeve where the contact had pulled the fabric. She smoothed it. Officers moving the man toward the exterior. Into his radio, Dre was saying, "Building is compromised. 3 known contacts, 1 detained. Full advance team in position now. 48 hours. We move the timeline. 48 hours. The visit moved up by 2 days, turning back toward the stairwell. "Cole, stop." Dre behind her. The others were gone. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately name. "Your wrist," he said. A reddening across the back of her left hand. The man's watch had caught her on his swing. She hadn't registered it. "It's nothing," she said. He looked at it a moment longer than necessary. "Are you all right?" he asked. The question was quiet, not procedural, not debrief language, just the question, asked the way someone asked it when they actually wanted to know. She looked at him. 3 years of making herself small in hallways. 3 years of nodding and stepping back and taking the stairs because someone with a clipboard had decided that nurses didn't handle security. 3 years of being correct about things and being sent back to her floor. She was not small in this corridor. She had not been small for a single second of it. "Yes," she said. "I know," he said. "I just wanted to hear you say it." She went back to her floor. At 8, Holt called an emergency staff meeting. Best suit, elevated color. The facility was being placed under enhanced security protocols for the next 48 hours. Federal agents present throughout the building. Staff to report any irregularities immediately. The word protocol used 7 times in 12 minutes. No mention of the man in the loading dock. No mention of the relay or the clone badge scheme. No mention that someone had been patiently mapping this building for weeks, with the specific intention of reaching a doctor who traveled with the leader of the country. Holt didn't know most of it. He knew enough to look like part of something important, which was all he had ever wanted. 3rd row, listening, saying nothing, thinking about 48 hours, about a back corner table in a quiet restaurant and a folder and a man who had read an incomplete file and asked her for the rest of it without demanding she explain herself first. About the form that said administrative separation. About what it had not said. 2 days. The building was quiet in the dark outside her window that night. Already planning. The morning of the visit, the hospital woke up differently. Not louder, quieter. The kind of quiet that had weight to it. The pressure of held breath. Of a building that knew something was coming without knowing what. Meredith arrived at 5:40, 2 additional vehicles on the ground level of the parking structure. Black, government plates. She didn't slow down. Lobby, 3 people she had never seen before, positioned at angles that covered every entrance without appearing to. Dressed like visitors. They were not visitors. Past them without acknowledgement, elevator to the 3rd floor. Dre was at the nurse's station. Hadn't slept, that specific kind of tired that came not from lack of rest, but from a mind that had been running at operational speed for 18 consecutive hours and was now shifting into something sharper, not slower. The tiredness of a person who was fully switched on. "She arrives at 1400, he said. "Dr. Foss. Motorcade comes through the base and she'll be brought here directly by escort. If there's no emergency, she holds at the vehicle. But if there is one, main entrance, 2nd floor junction, patient corridor." He paused. "The relay on the bracket was removed last night by the cell. They know we were watching. We let them pull it." She looked at him. "We let them think they were cleaning up," he said. "What they don't know is that we have their full access profile, every badge sequence they captured, every credential they tried." Arms folded. "They're going to try to come in clean today. New credentials. Our assumption is they had a backup data source. How many people? We think 2. The woman from the 3rd floor is still in play. She was seen near the perimeter at 0530. The man from the loading dock. In custody. Not talking. He looked at her directly. "I need you on the floor. Not as backup. Not as an extra set of eyes. As the senior protection officer on this corridor. Because that's what you are." The hallway was empty around them. 3 years of being told what she was not. Meredith straightened. It was not a dramatic motion. It was simply what happened when a person stopped holding something down. "Tell me the breach points," she said. He told her. She listened the way she had always listened, completely once, without notes, storing it in the order it would need to be accessed. When he finished, she asked 3 questions. He answered all 3. She nodded. That was the briefing. "One more thing," he said. She waited. "The administrative separation," he said. "I pulled the classified portion last night. I have the clearance level for it." He held her gaze. "I know what happened." Very still in the corridor. She knew which section he meant. Had written part of it herself, in a room with 2 lawyers and a review board that had the authority to end her career, and had exercised that authority with the careful language of people who needed no fingerprints on the blade. A call made in 3 seconds that had saved 3 lives and ended any possibility of ever working a detail again. She had been right. It had not mattered. Being right and being protected were different categories, and she had learned that at the cost of everything she had built. "I'm sorry," Dre said. "That should not have happened to you." A long moment. "It brought me here," she said. He held her gaze. "Yes," he said quietly. "It did." At 13:20, Holt appeared on the floor. Best suit. Face carrying the elevated color of a man in the presence of something larger than himself, and not certain how to hold it. He stopped when he saw Meredith at the junction, tactical vest over her scrubs, credentials badge on a lanyard that was not a hospital badge. He stared. "Who authorized—" "I did," Dre said. "She's a floor nurse. She doesn't have the clearance to—" "Her clearance level is above yours, sir." "Completely level. It has been since before she walked into your hospital." Holt looked at Meredith. She looked back at him. No explanation. No apology. No adjustment to make him more comfortable. Just standing in the corridor she had walked for 3 years, past his office, past every meeting where he hadn't looked at her, past every time she had been told to get back to her floor, and simply standing there, which was enough. His mouth closed. He walked to the elevator without another word. At 13:55, Dre's radio. Short, clipped. Motorcade is 5 out. Foss is in vehicle 2. Possible contact at the north entrance. Already moving. North entrance. Service stairwell access. She had mapped it 4 days ago, and again this morning before the briefing, and knew every step of it in the dark. Stairs at speed, ground level, north corridor, 30 feet to the entrance door. The woman was already inside. A badge, cloned from a secondary relay somewhere the team hadn't found. They had rebuilt their profile after the first device was pulled. Smart. Expected. Moving fast toward the junction, something low and close in her right hand. 20 feet back and closing. Nothing said yet. The geometry calculated. Corridor length, closing speed, the junction ahead. If the badge worked, she would be through in 4 seconds. 20 feet, covered in 3. In from behind and to the left. Controlled intercept, hand on the woman's wrist before she could process the contact. Object controlled, body turned away from the reader. She was trained. The struggle lasted 11 seconds. It ended with the woman on the floor, wrist locked, Meredith's knee on the ground beside her, and a small transmitter, not a weapon, a device designed to send one final signal to someone outside, on the floor between them. 2 officers from the east end of the corridor at a dead run. Dre from the stairwell 15 seconds later. He looked at Meredith, at the woman on the floor, at the transmitter. She had a secondary relay, Meredith said. Somewhere on this floor. We need to sweep the east corridor badge reader before Foss enters the building. Already on it, he said. Then he looked at her again. Longer this time than the situation required. She stood, scrubs wrinkled, left knee scuffed from the floor, credentials badge twisted on the lanyard, straightened it. At 14:12, Dr. Elaine Foss entered the building. No emergency. The president had not required medical support. The visit had concluded without incident at the installation. Dr. Foss came into the facility to confirm the corridor was clear and to sign off on the contingency report, the paperwork that would say, in the careful language of after-action documentation, that everything had gone exactly as planned. She was a compact woman in her 60s, precise and unhurried in her movements, carrying the particular quiet authority of someone who had spent decades in rooms where calm was the most important thing anyone could offer. She stopped when she saw Meredith standing at the junction. Dre stepped forward. Dr. Foss, I know who she is, Foss said. She extended her hand. Meredith shook it. Special Agent in Charge Cole, Foss said. I worked 2 details with you. Before. A pause. I was sorry to hear about what happened. It was a long time ago. It shouldn't have been a long time ago. It should have been resolved. Steady, direct look. There are people in the service who have been trying to have that file reviewed for 2 years. The right people now know where you are. Meredith said nothing. That's not a warning, Foss said. It's a beginning. She looked at Dre. This facility performed well today. The security response was exceptional. Back to Meredith. Particularly here. She continued down the corridor. Meredith stood at the junction. The badge reader hummed quietly beside her. The overhead fluorescent lights cast the same flat glow they had cast on every other shift of the last 3 years. The east corridor smelled like hospital, antiseptic and warm air, and the distant suggestion of food from the cafeteria floor below. 10,000 times in this corridor. It had never felt like this. Dre appeared beside her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The building was settling back into its ordinary rhythms around them. Call lights. Distant PA announcements. The sound of a cart being moved somewhere down the hall. The file review, he said finally. I heard. Does it change anything? She thought about that. 11 years. A decision made in 3 seconds that had been right and had cost her everything and had brought her here, to this building, to this corridor, to 3 years of invisibility in a place that had turned out to need her exactly as she was, not despite what she had been. Because of it. No, she said. Then after a pause, "Yes." He looked at her. She looked back. His jaw still slightly off-center. His eyes still that color she hadn't named. Still looking like someone who had been working since before dawn and had no particular intention of stopping. "Dinner," she said, and this time it was not an accident. This time she knew exactly what word she was choosing and chose it. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. "Same place?" he asked. "Different table," she said. "I want to sit by the window." He nodded slowly, the way people nodded when they understood that a sentence was about more than the words in it. On the floor above, Gerald was waiting for his son. Holt was in his office writing an email about the day that used the word protocol 4 times and did not mention Meredith Cole once. And Meredith Cole stood at the junction of a corridor where she had been invisible for 3 years, and she was not invisible, and she was not small, and she was not just a floor nurse, and she had never been. She had always been exactly this. She had simply been waiting for the building to need her badly enough to finally see it. The end. If this story moved you, you know what to do. Hit that like button and let me know you were here. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I want to know if you are in Texas, in London, in São Paulo, or somewhere in between. And if you are new here, welcome. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because at Secrets of Silent Badges, the quiet ones always have the best stories. I will see you in the next one.